Gemini and soul exhaustion. Gemini, there is a kind of tiredness you carry that sleep does not touch. You can rest, take time off, distract yourself, even feel temporarily better, and yet something inside remains quietly depleted. This is not physical fatigue. It is not lack of motivation. It is not even emotional burnout in the way people usually describe it. This is soul exhaustion, and it arrives when your inner world has been giving more meaning, more attention, and more energy than it has been receiving. You are a carrier of currents. Words, ideas, emotions, conversations, they move through you constantly. You listen between the lines, you translate what others cannot articulate. You hold space, bridge gaps, soften conflicts, explain truths gently so they can be heard. This is a gift. But it is also a drain when it is not consciously replenished. Because Gemini does not just communicate information, you transmit energy. The exhaustion begins subtly. Your curiosity dulls. Things that once fascinated you now feel heavy or pointless. You still function, still speak, still engage, but there is less joy in it. Laughter feels thinner. Silence feels uncomfortable. You keep moving, not because you are inspired, but because stopping would require you to feel how empty your inner reserves have become. This happens because your soul is mercurial, fast-moving, sensitive, porous. You absorb not only what is said, but what is meant. Over time, this constant intake without ritualized release creates spiritual congestion. Your mind stays active, but your spirit grows tired. You become full of noise and starved of meaning. Here is the core burden that leads to soul exhaustion for Gemini: the absence of energetic boundaries. You are open by nature, you listen generously, you engage easily, and because you can move between worlds, intellectual, emotional, social, you often forget to come home to yourself. You live in the exchange, not in the center, and eventually, the soul begins to signal that it cannot continue this way. Gemini burns out not from effort, but from dispersion. Your energy leaks through 1,000 small openings. Conversations you didn't need to hold, information you didn't need to consume, emotions you didn't need to carry. None of these alone are heavy, but together, they drain your spiritual core. The tragedy is that Gemini often misreads this exhaustion. You tell yourself you are bored, unmotivated, restless. You seek novelty, stimulation, change of scenery, and sometimes that helps, but only briefly, because the problem is not lack of input, it is lack of soul nourishment. Soul exhaustion is the state where you continue to function while feeling internally uninhabited. You are present everywhere, yet absent from yourself. And the more this persists, the more disconnected you feel from your intuition, your sense of meaning, your inner guidance. You still think clearly, but you no longer feel aligned. This is not a failure. It is a message. Your soul is not asking you to stop living. It is asking you to stop leaking. It is asking for ritual, for rhythm, for intentional return. Before healing can begin, recognition must occur. And if these words resonate, it is because your soul has already begun to speak. Gemini, soul exhaustion rarely announces itself loudly. It does not collapse you, it whispers. And because it whispers, you often ignore it. This is where the inner mirror becomes uncomfortable, because it shows you not what is broken, but what you have been avoiding noticing. One of the first signs is a quiet loss of wonder. You still consume information, but it no longer nourishes you. You scroll, listen, read, talk, yet nothing truly lands. Ideas pass through without leaving warmth behind. You may even feel impatient with things that once carried meaning. Spiritual topics, emotional conversations, creative impulses. This impatience is not boredom. It is fatigue disguised as indifference. Another sign appears in your relationship with silence. Silence begins to feel threatening, empty, heavy. You fill it quickly with music, podcasts, messages, internal dialogue, not because you enjoy the noise, but because silence would force you to feel how far you've drifted from your inner center. The shadow here is subtle. You mistake constant mental activity for aliveness, when in truth it is a way to avoid grief, emptiness, or spiritual disconnection. There is also a dulling of intuition. Gemini intuition is usually quick, playful, conversational. It arrives as a thought that feels alive. When soul exhaustion sets in, this inner voice becomes faint. Decisions feel harder. You second-guess yourself more. You ask for external input even on things you once knew instinctively. This is the soul saying, "I am tired of being bypassed." You may notice a compulsive urge to change environments, plans, or identities. A sense that something is off, but you can't name what. So you assume the solution is movement, new ideas, new goals, new people. But the shadow truth is this: you are not seeking stimulation, you are seeking rest, but you don't yet know how to receive it. Gemini's shadow around soul exhaustion is the belief that stopping equals stagnation. So you keep going, even when the joy has leaked out. You keep communicating, even when the words feel hollow. You keep showing up, even when your soul is quietly begging for withdrawal, not from life, but from excess. Another ignored sign is emotional flatness. You don't feel deeply sad, but you also don't feel deeply moved. Highs and lows soften into a grey middle. You may function well, even efficiently, but without intimacy with yourself. This numbness is often the soul conserving energy when it has been overdrawn for too long. The mirror asks a difficult question. When was the last time you felt spiritually full? Not entertained, not distracted, but full, quietly aligned, inwardly warm, connected to meaning without effort. If you struggle to answer, that is not a failure. It is awareness arriving. Gemini. The shadow is not accusing you. It is revealing a truth. You have been living outward for too long without a sacred inward rhythm. You have been translating the world, but neglecting to translate yourself back to yourself. Soul exhaustion is not punishment, it is feedback. And once you are willing to see it, restoration becomes possible. Gate 3. The esoteric alchemy from soul drain to soul reclamation. Gemini, this is where the conversation shifts from diagnosis to remembrance. Because soul exhaustion is not healed by rest alone. It is healed by reconnection. And reconnection, for you, is an esoteric act, an alchemy that works beneath logic, beneath productivity, beneath the visible world. From a mystical perspective, your soul is governed by Mercury, the messenger between realms, the translator of heaven and earth. When Mercury energy is overused without ritual cleansing, the soul becomes cluttered, not broken, overcrowded. Too many voices, too many symbols, too many unfinished energetic exchanges. This is why ordinary solutions fail. Sleep rests the body, vacations rest the mind, but the soul requires symbolic nourishment. Esoteric alchemy begins when you stop asking, "How do I fix this?" and start asking, "What is my soul asking me to remember?" Because exhaustion is not the absence of energy, it is energy that has lost its meaning. And meaning is restored through ritual, not efficiency. For Gemini, the alchemical shift happens when words slow down and become sacred again. You live through language, but lately language has been consumed rather than consecrated. You speak, write, read, absorb, but rarely with intention. The esoteric path invites you to turn communication back into ceremony. A word spoken with awareness carries more life force than 1,000 words spoken unconsciously. Breath is another portal. Not breath as exercise, but breath as invocation. In esoteric traditions, breath is the bridge between soul and body. When you consciously breathe slowly, rhythmically, you call scattered energy back home. Your soul recognizes this signal. It softens. It begins to return. Silence, too, is not emptiness in the mystical sense. Silence is a womb, a holding space where fragmented parts can reorganize. When you allow silence without filling it, you create a vacuum that draws your energy inward. At first, this feels uncomfortable. But discomfort is simply energy rearranging itself. Stay long enough, and silence becomes nourishment. The alchemy of restoration also involves symbolism. Gemini souls heal through symbols because symbols bypass the overworked mind. A candle lit with intention. A journal used not to analyze, but to receive. A phrase repeated like a spell, not to convince yourself, but to anchor yourself. These acts speak the language your soul understands. Here is the esoteric truth. Your soul does not need more stimulation, it needs containment. a vessel, a rhythm, a boundary that allows energy to accumulate instead of leak. Ritual creates that container. Not rigid rituals, but living ones. Gentle, repeatable acts that signal safety to your nervous system and coherence to your soul. When this alchemy begins, you may notice something subtle but profound. Your curiosity returns, not frantic but warm. Your intuition sharpens, not loud but steady. You feel less pulled outward and more drawn inward. This is not withdrawal from life. It is recentering. Gemini, soul reclamation does not happen all at once. It happens the moment you stop treating your inner world as something to manage and start treating it as something to honor. Gate 4. Practical. Esoteric practices for Gemini's soul renewal. Gemini. Now we move from understanding into living practice. Not practices that demand discipline or perfection, but practices that invite your soul back into your body. Esoteric renewal for you must be gentle, symbolic, and rhythmic because your soul does not respond to force. It responds to meaning. The first practice is sacred journaling as spell work. This is not journaling to analyze your day or solve problems. This is writing as invocation. Sit with a blank page and begin with a single sentence such as, "What is my soul trying to tell me right now?" Then write without correcting, rereading, or judging. Let the words come unfiltered. Gemini, your soul speaks through language, but only when the mind steps aside. Treat what you write as a message, not content. When finished, close the journal. Do not reread immediately. This creates a boundary between soul voice and mental commentary. The second practice is mercurial breath ritual. Once or twice a day, especially when you feel mentally crowded, pause and take 9 slow breaths. Inhale through the nose, imagining scattered thoughts returning to the center of your chest. Exhale through the mouth, imagining borrowed energies leaving your field. 9 is a mercurial number associated with completion and return. This is not relaxation. This is energetic recall. The third practice is intentional silence. Gemini, silence heals you only when it is chosen, not forced. Set aside small, defined spaces of silence, 5 minutes, 10 minutes where no input is allowed. No music, no reading, no internal planning. If thoughts arise, let them pass without following them. Think of silence as a temple, not a void. You are not depriving yourself. You are creating a container where your soul can reassemble itself. Another powerful practice is symbolic fasting from information. This does not mean disconnecting from life. It means choosing one period, an evening, a morning, a day where you consciously reduce intake. Fewer conversations, fewer headlines, fewer opinions. Gemini's soul starves not from lack of input, but from lack of digestion. Fasting allows assimilation. It tells your soul, you are no longer required to process everything. You may also feel drawn to mantra or sigil work. Choose a simple phrase that feels alive to you, such as, "I return to myself." Repeat it quietly during moments of overwhelm, or write it on paper and keep it near your workspace or bed. Symbols work because they bypass your analytical mind. They speak directly to your energetic field. Finally, there is lunar and planetary attunement. Gemini souls restore best when aligned with natural rhythms. Notice how you feel on different lunar phases. Use the new moon for silence and intention, the full moon for release through writing or breath. On Wednesdays, Mercury's day, be especially gentle with communication. Speak less, listen more. Let language become sacred again. None of these practices are meant to fix you. They are meant to remember you, to signal to your soul that it is safe to return, safe to rest, safe to take up space inside you again. Do not rush them. Do not optimize them. Let them become familiar, like a language you once knew fluently. Gemini. When your soul is nourished, your curiosity returns as joy instead of compulsion. Your mind becomes a bridge again, not a burden. And your energy, once scattered, begins to gather quietly, patiently, faithfully. Gemini, soul exhaustion is not a flaw in you. It is a signal of sensitivity, of openness, of a spirit that has been giving more than it has been receiving. Your tiredness is not asking you to disappear from the world, it is asking you to return to yourself. You do not need to escape life to rest your soul. You need moments where life becomes quiet enough for you to hear yourself again. When you stop treating rest as absence and begin treating it as ritual, something ancient inside you relaxes. The noise softens. The scattered pieces begin to recognize one another. If this message reached you at the right moment, trust that it did not arrive by accident. Your soul knows when it is ready to be gathered. You are not meant to carry everything you hear, everything you sense, everything you translate. Some energies are meant to pass through. Others must be released. And some, your own, must be invited home. Sit with this question, gently, without urgency. What would it feel like to let your soul breathe again? You do not need to answer it now. Let it live inside you. Let it work quietly. If this reflection resonated, stay with this channel. These messages are not here to overwhelm you with knowledge, but to guide you back to meaning. Share in the comments what kind of rest your soul is asking for right now. And if you wish to continue walking this esoteric path of remembrance and renewal, subscribe not for more information, but for deeper connection.